Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hearing about Brahman is good. Taking teachings on Brahman is better. Better still is meditating directly upon Brahman. And best of all is that meditation in which all doubt about the nature of reality dies away forever. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So we are now in the midst of the auspicious weekend of 4th of July, which we all look upon as Swami Vivekananda's Mahasamadhi, the time when he left the body on July 4th, probably for many good reasons, but one of the best being that he was trying to show us the true nature of freedom, which is especially good lesson for people in the West who have based their freedom on physical matter and enjoyments and business and active pastimes. And he was trying to bring to us a deeper message of inaction, meditation, and wisdom. Divine Mother wisdom. So we always celebrate Divine Mother and Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Sharda Devi, and Swami Vivekananda and his brother monks. And then the entire family and extended family of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa around the world. They say so over 5 million people or more. And growing all the time as the message of Vedanta, which could be the umbrella under which all of this develops, becomes a way in which we can place our minds on reality alone, as the Upanishads tell us. Danur Grihitva Upanishadam Mahastram. Mahastram means great. So those great Upanishads and their eternal message advise us to concentrate our minds on reality. And for those beings who are in a busy workaday world, we know that this has to be done first by cutting out some time and placing our concentration on our ideal. So as Vivekananda said, everyone here in this world needs an ideal. So if you select an Ishtam or Ishta Devata or Ishta Devi, then you have that protection in everything that you do. And she infills you with wisdom, just as the God blog that I posted yesterday, which we'll look at in an hour or two, along with 4 other ones, is telling us that Sri Ramakrishna said that Divine Mother sat in his throat and pushed out wisdom all the time, and that everything that he said was hers. And he merely opens his mouth and she spoke through him. So that kind of Ishtam or chosen ideal is what Sri Ramakrishna meant when he said, don't you know that there are 2 beings here, when he pointed at himself? There's the mother, and then there's her devotee. So wonderful thoughts like that, knowing that God dwells within us and in everything. And at the same time, putting the fine point on it, that God can't be a person, place, or thing as far as its name and its form goes, but it's the indwelling essence in all things, in all beings. Then it's up to us to bring that divine presence out and into the open. Don't hide your light under a bushel, is how Jesus put that. So we need to be active in our spiritual life and participating in Sangha life and spreading the teachings of the Dharma everywhere. And of course, those of us who've made this our life's mission, to whatever extent that we can inside of our busy lives, feel the blessing of that boon of the Divine Mother as she works through all of us to enlighten people as to the nature of reality, and also to come to know the distinction between reality and relativity. Because if you're lost in just the lower sciences and you've not yet acquainted yourself with this higher wisdom they call Paravidya, then you're missing out on the main part of existence. Because Brahman is existence itself. And so in India, they never argued back and forth about whether God existed or not. They just called it existence with a capital E. Sat Chit Ananda was that great that great word. And the Sat part of that is that existence with a capital E, or you could also say Swarupa, the essence in all things. In order to see that essence here, as Vivekananda was saying about having a higher ideal, then we're going to have to pierce through appearances, false superimpositions, and also cut down these conditionings from hundreds of years of living in the world with families, ancestors, and under the pale of different religious traditions that have come and gone. Some of them fresh and new on the scene, like the new dispensation of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and some of them like rivers that make it only partway to the ocean, he said, and then disappear underground. So if we can update and make everything current in our religious life, it would mean to add spirituality into the quotient. And we know that spirituality is defined well in the 4 yogas of wisdom, meditation, devotion, and selfless service of God and living beings. So there's nothing then that this Vedanta, this new dispensation, or Neo-Vedanta sometimes we're calling it, cannot unveil for us and cannot reveal to us. And so if any questions come up in the mind about that, in the busy world of everyday life, then we get together as Guru, Dharma, and Sangha, and we talk about these things until they disappear. That is, asato ma sadgamoya, as we say, but also the unreal never exists. The real never ceases to be, Krishna says in the Gita. And the truth about both of those, the real and the unreal, has been revealed to us by the seers. So we talk about these things that pose obstacles. And we look out upon those beings who are as yet uninitiated into the secrets and the beauty of spiritual life, in which most of us live so deeply and count upon so completely. And we try and spread this message of Vedanta with its peace and its bliss and its love and its divine light into the hearts and minds of all living beings to the best of our abilities inside the situations and according to our own karmas and predilections. And that's what satsang puts a fine point on at the end of a week. And this weekend then is a special especially fine point as we meet under the auspice of Swami Vivekananda's Mahasamadhi. A Mahasamadhi is an exit from the body in full consciousness. And beings need to put off this higher consciousness from their minds when they enter the body, so that they can do this work that the Divine Mother has gifted them with. So Sri Ramakrishna said about Swami Vivekananda when he was young, the young Narendra, when he comes to know who he truly is, then he'll leave the body right away. They won't be able to keep him in it anymore. And that came to pass. But in the meantime, Divine Mother kept him in the body for 39 years and was able to get all this marvelous work done through him, all the way to our own nation and here in America, where I am in Hawaii, and into spreading into different parts of the world. Some of our students have written me and said they're traveling today in those parts of the world, so they won't be able to be with us today. And we wish them Durga, 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 safe travels to everywhere they go. And hopefully full consciousness, knowing that they are spreading that wisdom of the Divine Mother by their very movements. And if they do check in on us later for God blogs or tomorrow for class, we'll be going through the divine subject of the will to live a spiritual life according to Shankara. And it's third class, 3 of 4 classes, and finding out how we can live up to that great goal and attain that paragatam that all great beings talked about. Even back before Jesus, to Lord Buddha some 550 years earlier, and he talked about gatam, gatam, paragatam. There are many goals to attain, and those should be sought after. But that supreme goal should be kept in mind first and foremost. That's, as Sri Ramakrishna said, the one before the zeros. Take that one away, and the things of life tend not to amount to much, as many people are finding out. And what to speak of a life that isn't necessarily fruitful. There are lives that are actually painful and full of suffering. And nobody likes to see that. Nobody in their right mind, that is. So when we come together and talk about Vedanta, we're automatically putting ourselves in our right mind, in higher mind. And when questions come up in that right mind, they deserve to be answered. And Vedanta will always come forward and be there for us when we need those answers. Maybe there's some questions you can put forth then, or some insights that you've received from the Divine Mother herself via the scriptures you've been studying. I read something by Swami Vivekananda just yesterday that said, you are the kind of people I've been waiting for, he said. And make sure that you, when you study the scriptures and take my advice and do what I say, that you let the world know about it. So it's almost a direct message coming out of the pages for me. And a good message to put forth then on this day of Swami Vivekananda's Mahasamadhi. That means, of course, it'll be July 4th on Monday. This is that weekend, and usually that weekend we're on some sort of retreat or some sort of seminar, but we'll celebrate it with this satsang. The God blog's coming up soon, and in tomorrow's class, he would be very, very, and probably is very happy that we will be studying such a a subject as the will to live a spiritual life. Right out of Shankar's Vivekachudamani. So who can then enter into this satsang this morning? Okay, Jyoti, what do you have to say? Namaste.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, everyone. My internet connection looks pretty good today, so I'm going to try and leave the video on. But it was just kind of a cheerful, a rejoicing kind of moment along the lines. I was able to share Swami Vivekananda's Song of the Sannyasin with a fellow co-worker yesterday. The verse came up in my head, or the part of the verse came up in my head of, thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. So cease lament, let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat Om. I was able to enter that into a conversation, and the person, asked what that was from, and I told them, and I hadn't yet printed off my physical copy of that yet. So when I did that, I was able to print off an extra copy for her and give it to her yesterday. So just kind of wanted to share that in the spirit of what we were just talking about with Swami Vivekananda's Mahasamadhi.
Very wonderful indeed. Of course, that Song of the Sannyasin goes way back early in our own history, even before SRV, when Jaima Music was touring. We went to different Vedanta societies around the US, and also, of course, went to India and appeared in the Kalpataru Day celebrations and so forth. And so we had quite a wonderful sacred arts ensemble, I called it, where we did music and poetry and so forth. A lot of that's still available to listen to in this day and time. But when we went to some of the Vedanta societies, we found out that the sannyasins there and the brahmacharis in the West, some of them Caucasian, they were beginning to pick up on this great station of life called sannyas and seek that highest enlightenment through it. They would end their meditations in the morning when we sat with them as guests at the centers. With that Song of Sannyasin, somebody would just say the first verse, the first line, and everyone would just start repeating it, and they just say it all together in one fell swoop. And so we got to see that in action and hear it, and realized how deep it had ingrained itself in the Western mind at that point, and these noble ideals that started off there every morning, first words they spoke was that Song of the Sannyasin, starting out with Wake Up to Note, the song that has its birth far off, where worldly taint could never reach, in mountain caves and glades of forest deep, whose calm no sigh for lust or wealth or gain could ever dare to break. So definitely wonderful that that's still being shared then by people and passed on through SRV to others, who are then passing it on to others. It doesn't really matter what religious preference they have, if they're just at least open-minded, that message will come through. And the line that you cite is very apropos and very fitting for this weekend, Swamiji's message. Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. It's like you've got this rope around your neck, and back here behind yourself, you're holding on to it, and you're yanking yourself this way and blaming the devil, then yanking yourself this way and praising the Lord, yanking yourself this way and complaining about your ancestors, and yanking yourself this way. You can never come down to thine only is the hand that's doing that. So that's beyond gods and devils and angels and heavens and earths and hells. And he has a verse that states that in the Song of Sannyasin. May peace be unto all. That verse where he talks about the deep peace in which you cut all your bonds and strike off thy fetters and realize the Atman. The self is all in all, none else exists, and thou art that. So that's realized by the self by the self. And that's the great ennobling message of Vedanta right there, that will transcend religions after taking the best of the essence out of religion, and then go on to this, what I was talking about, using a rather inadequate word called spirituality. But then we can replace that word with Vedanta nowadays. It's a combination of 4 yogas. And if we keep that in mind, then Vedanta can cover all bases. And then when somebody asks about, what do you mean, thine only is the hand? You mean I'm the cause of all this? Yes, in a big way. And until you know that, then it's also in a rather frightening way that you're the cause of all this. That's called a world. And we look out into the world and we see the cause and effect going on. And we try and be more and more responsible. And some of us have to withdraw from the fray in order to be able to help others and help ourselves. Much greater souls than we accomplish that by leaving their families and coming back later and giving them the good news of how you use 2 wings to get to the Lord, the wing of jnana, higher wisdom, and bhakti, intense and sincere love for God. So that message goes on getting transmitted through us, sometimes whether we know it or not, and whether or not we're on a podium giving a discourse or we're just out in the world every day, like you say, with your coworker. And those are the nuts and bolts of enlightenment. They go on behind the scenes mostly. And the movements and all that, they're good to keep track of, and they give us confidence and support us and compel us onwards. So yes, go thou from place to place and help them out of darkness was another line in that very song of the Sannyasin. Without the fear of pain or search for pleasure, he says, go beyond them both. So he follows the teachings of the Indian seers, which tell us about the dualities of good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, virtue and vice. And also this weekend, bondage and freedom. If we look at Swamiji's message, this eternal freedom called moksha, which is a state that's always at hand. It can never be brought about by anything. So, that self art thou, he says, thou art that. So the message of sadhana leading to freedom is the highest and best of all of the Vedanta. We put those 2 together, and then you've got the winning combination that you've always been looking for, that can keep you free, not just realize that you're free, but keep you free from falling back into that mire that they call samsara, or samsara pragbara, or maya, if you want a short 4-letter word for it. So good that we've brought up the song of the Sannyasin this weekend. Who else has something to add? Isha is getting ready to say something.
Namaste, Roji. Namaste, everyone. I'd maybe like to, if I could, ask you a question, which I was going to ask you last week in the seminar, but for some reason I just didn't really ask you at that point. But maybe a week or 10 days ago, I was reading about the concepts of nada and bindu, and I was reading in this little book about how these 2 concepts are well ingrained in, I think, probably the tantric section of Indian philosophy. And I was reading about how, like, they have this beautiful idea of how, first of all, from Brahman is visualized as Hiranyagarbha, being the golden egg, a golden self-luminous reality, which has this beautiful kind of resonance. It has a resonance which emanates from itself, and from this beautiful, powerful emanation, there comes this resonance. It's described as this resonating power which comes together in this 0 point, or it comes and collects together in a point which is the precursor to Om, and then from Om all the worlds get created. I think throughout the years I've heard you speak many times about your personal experience of seeing the word and getting to know the word, and the rishis and the seers of India, they seem to have a really, really strong connection to the word, and they have this easy access in a way to this profound concept. They're so close to the word. They're always able to see it, feel it, and explain it to the other people which are also on their way to recognize the same word. And if you could maybe for a little while talk here about Om and this beautiful idea of Nada and Bindu, and how through this resonance of the power of Brahman, all the worlds get created.
The Sristi Rahasya is the secret of creation. In Tantra, that's the way they would put it. And of course, the Vedasists and the yogis and others have their own deep experience with that nada, as you just called it, or nada Brahman, they call it the sound Brahman. So it's at least one, if not the deepest and most powerful way of realizing one's identification with or oneness with Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna said it was like hearing something in the distance and moving towards it in your meditation, like over sand dunes, until you finally reach the ocean. As you hear it, you know that there's something magnificent there in the distance, but you can't see it yet. So you'd say it might even trump sight or vision, this powerful path of Nada Brahman, or they call it Shabda Brahman. At least we know that those who are more mystically inclined than they are visually inclined, or visionaries, move toward this source of all vibrations. It's especially appealing, I think, for beings who are attracted to that divine mother power, who feel the wisdom of words and use them in a higher way, and refrain from using them in a crass way, like words can be used, just as gossip or mere fault finding, the kind of things that Holy Mother and others criticized about the usage of words. Better to remain silent like a sage than to just talk garrulously and without any reverence or respect for words. So that's going to take some inward trajectory. You're going to be concentrating on listening to this voice of God, or the sound of God, God's voice. Even as a musician, I was interested very much in that, because music seemed to me to be something very sacred. So looking for the source of that, all that was sacred in sound, and combining sounds, or even isolating sounds, and anything as magnificent as a symphony, right on down to something as simple as a drone of a tambura, would hold this fascination of sound for me. and for others I'd read about too, and not just in Indian tradition either, but in Sufism and so forth, a very deep attraction to God as sound. Shabda Brahman, Nada Brahman, the Anahata, the sound that emanates from the heart, and is a path that easily shuts off the senses and helps one to focus inwardly. One can still be manning the five senses and hear something very pleasing, everything from music that's been gleaned from the source. Because there are a lot of sounds that, of course, are only reflective of the source, but not coming straight from the source. So if you go close to that source of sound, then it's not only music, but it's also words like scripture that become that you realize are imbued with the divine presence. So it's really a direct way of seeing God. And of course, seeing is not the right word for it, but it does tend to turn off the senses, and it is very connected, Shabda with Jyoti, that is sound with light. So those who have an awakening at the third eye level, the Agya chakra here, have made that connection between divine light and divine sound. And in the case of Swami Vivekananda, whom we're celebrating this weekend as his Mahasamadhi, he was very much a master of that path. And of course, his words rang with this deep, deep power of not only transmission, but how to convince others to penetrate through with the power of words, penetrate through the ignorance that veils our sight and our hearing, and go beyond the surface. And it doesn't take that much effort. It's just take a breath and dive, which sometimes they use as an instruction. If you're, say, repeating the mantra that you've been given by your precious guru, and the mantra begins to take you deep, deep, and maybe on a certain day you're not feeling that depth with the mantra, so you're supposed to visualize that it's like each bead of the mala is a link in a chain that takes you across the body of water, and at one point that chain is fastened to the treasure at the bottom. So you're supposed to pull yourself bead by bead towards that divine sound. And then finally, you're going to have to take a deep breath and follow link by link that chain down to where it's fastened to the bottom of the ocean of consciousness, is of course what we're saying here. So it's a way of deepening and intensifying both your relationship with the Absolute, with Brahman, or with your Ishtam in this case through the mantra, and also having the overall realization that everything's permeated with divine vibration. Science knows that it's permeated with vibration, but the rather a secular approach to it, as we might say, that seems to be stripped of all the devotional trappings and accoutrements that go with the spiritual path, that make it so alluring and which intensify our devotion and deepen our meditations and make our wisdom more capacious. That's, of course, in the slokas themselves. They talk about that. Apyayantu mamangani vak pranaschakshu shrotra matra balamendriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahma upanishadam. So that, again, there's another mention of the great Upanishads in which these sounds have been made into pathways that open up channels or nadis inside to the source. Every good river flows to a source. We were talking about it at the seminar last weekend. So that source flows to its destination, the ocean. It also has a source that it comes from, which is the wellspring back in the mountains. So you are that wellspring, and you course like a river towards your destination called Brahman. And of course, when you take on a name and a form and you restrict yourself to two banks that are on the other side of your river, of you as a river, then of course there's going to be limitation there, and you're going to want to know about keep knowledge of the source that you come from, the Atman, and also foretell and have foresight of the ocean of Brahman that you're flowing towards. And all of this is accomplished perfectly and magnificently with the word. Even Christ was into that teaching, infatuated with it. In the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was God. So it's a sure and certain way of aligning the mind, purifying it and aligning it with the essence, or the essence of existence, which we were just talking about. And you check in with it day by day. It's just as easy as hearing your mother's voice. You shut your eyes, you sit back. Ah, there it is. I hear it. You see. And then when you have more time, I hear it, and I'm going to merge into it now. I have my hour's meditation here ahead of me. Use the mantra, set myself up. This is not setting yourself up for a fall, it's setting yourself up for a rise. And so you get this rise of ocean of consciousness. You see the wellspring again, bubbling up from the river, the ocean of Sri Ramakrishna's name. There's a beautiful song about that. The holy land of Bengal is flowing again in this river of Sri Ramakrishna. So these beings then, from lifetime to lifetime, from age to age even, keep track of this barometer, you might say, of measuring their closeness, their nearness to the divine being, whether it's with form or beyond, that is Ishvara or Brahman, through this measuring device of listening to the sound of everything. In the countryside, as Milarepa sings, there are many colored birds. The green parrot with red eyes. The monkeys are cavorting in the trees joyfully. Here is a perfect place for me to practice yoga, he says, in this divine land. So he has beautiful songs in which he portrays and explains the connection between the outer sounds that he's hearing everywhere, that are random and spontaneous, but yet are all free, connecting back to this inner world. The land of the happy land of yoga, he calls it. So maintaining this position, this right orientation that Lord Buddha talked about, is greatly facilitated by, and actually made quite easy and wonderful by counting yourself as an adherent to the path of Shabda Brahman. I'm following the path of God as sound everywhere. And the Guru's words, of course, are nothing but that as well, and the wisdom from the scriptures. And the beautiful thing about words is that when the glass is half full, it gurgles. When the glass becomes full, then it's all silent. So then there's this silence that we come upon that's beyond words. And these are really thoughts or root thoughts. And then there's getting beyond those thoughts too, and silencing that vibration And that's where you fall into this ocean of peace. That's a good fall there, where you fall like a hailstone into the ocean of pure conscious awareness. So you might say 3 levels of the word there: the external, the internal, and then the completely immersed or absolute, where silence reigns, the peace that passes all understanding. If I just happen to have a copy of it right here. If you look into the footfalls of the Indian rishis, then you'll find that I've done my part in explaining the path of Shabda Brahman or Nada Brahman and the great principle of Om, and as a matrix for everything that's created, as you were just saying. The Sristi Rahasya, it's a secret of creation, that everything has come out of this word, and nobody sounds the word, it sounds itself, the Tantras say. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna found it too, when he came upon it in his deepest contemplations. He saw worlds coming out of it and going back into it, but there was no time passing as this happened. So when the cosmic law of time comes down around everything, then it tends to condition the mind to thinking in a certain way. Like maybe it's trapped by time, or maybe everything that exists has to exist in cycles of time. But the true existence is beyond cycles, and the cycles are just recurring echoes of something that's an eternal reality, a sound that's always there, or a light that's always there. That's the foundation of everything that you're talking about there. And if you take the 5 senses, then you'll find that sight and sound hold the highest level of attraction and wisdom for people. Tasting, touching, seeing, and smelling, seeing, hearing. Hearing has this highest position of the most subtle of the 5 senses, and it goes with the most subtle of the 5 elements called ether. So hearing and ether go together. The medium through which we hear something is air or ether, and beyond that is the ether of the mind. As the mind can silence itself from the lower vibrations that are going on with sound as well, then it can flow in that river of divine peace into the ocean of Brahman, and should do that then every day, and connect the wellspring to the ocean. Then the river flowing between, you see, it just has these 2 banks, are the banks of time and space, you might say. And those don't pose a problem for that soul anymore. Rather, it can work with that and flow freely and unimpeded. May our thoughts flow free and unimpeded. May our minds expand in their capacity to know Brahman. And may our bodies experience great health. And then, as we're doing now, and as I was just talking about at the beginning, may we spread this message to everyone. May our words carry Divine Mother wisdom with them. It's one of the physical austerities, is to purify your speech. Sri Krishna talks about it in the Gita. So you can't really be very acceptable to people out and about, or to people in spiritual circles, or even in conventional religions, if your speech is crass and pointed and too critical and so forth. You have to make it sweet and make it appealing to get that message through. And that's one of the appeals of the Upanishads. It combines poetry of words with economy of words, with philosophical nature of words, the potential for conveying the highest truth through words to other living beings who are maybe just standing by there waiting to open an ear. They just need to have that opportunity that you can share with them. As Jyoti was saying, anyone who's around you who's open-minded, that's got to be actually one of the first requisites, is that you're open-minded to the truth of all religions, and that you want to hear, and that then hearing becomes that vehicle by which enlightenment can begin to take place. So may we hear with these ears what is good and spiritual, and see with these eyes what is noble and uplifting. As my teacher used to always chant, Badram Karebihi Sriniyamadev, Badram Pasyen Akshabir Yajatraha. He would chant that a couple times a week. And it would be a fool indeed who would sit there in front of a person who was chanting something like that about the powerful intensity of sound and not say to themselves in that moment, I'm here before a living oracle of truth, and he's speaking to me the truth. I should open up and hear the truth. Thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. I mean, it's in every religion, and it's the knowledge of all these great souls that come to us. And why we remain closed, who knows? That ignorance hopefully will die in us in any given lifetime, where we find the secret of the attraction of divine words. We clean out our physical ears in our showers with our washing cloths every day to make sure that the physical mechanism is clean, but there's also some inner ear that we have to do some cleaning with, obviously, and use that washing cloth of the Guru's words and the Shruti, what you hear from the truths in the scriptures. Those passages, whether they be physical, mental, philosophical, or spiritual, all have to be open and flowing with this divine sound.
Babaji?
Yes.
May I ask a question?
Yes, again.
Okay. I heard an analogy the other day around the 8-limbed yoga that the idea was that advance in any limb is like brings all the other limbs with it. So like a chair, the chair's got 4 legs, not a chair, a table has 4 legs, and you drag it by one leg, all the others come with it. But it seemed to me this was being said in terms of focusing on those samyamas that give different powers, cities, as well as on samadhi. And I'm just wondering whether it's really possible. I mean, the person who was saying this made it sound like it was possible to enter into samadhi even before pratyahara had been mastered. And I just would like to hear your thoughts about that. And also, just backing up, how can you have pratyahara if you don't have the yamas, at the very least, under your control?
There's definitely full enlightenment, and there's stages along the way. And then there are these special experiences that are somehow via good karma and auspicious timing granted to souls who are nowhere near ready for them. They're not ready for full enlightenment. All the nadis have to be opened, and enlightenment has to dawn on the mind by stages. It's just not the physical nadis that people are so concerned with all the time with their bodies. Oh, I've got to get my body ready for this because my nervous system has to withstand this brunt of this great light. That nervous system you're talking about is in your head, not in your body. It's in your mind. That's what can get imbalanced if you pour too much light into it too quickly or too early. So, I mean, the body can get diseased, but that's not the result of too much light usually. Sometimes a soul can leave the body consciously when it's no longer of any use, because it's become like in the case of Shankara and Swami Vivekananda, in just short amount of time. The elephant entered into the hut, as Sri Ramakrishna said about his samadhi, and shook it down to its very foundation. So that means when the samadhi, the special samadhi that's going to last, gets into the body-mind mechanism, then that soul's not going to be manning the body for that much longer. We'll give it up. Like a blown off leaf in a gale, Sri Ramakrishna said. So anyway, that's one direction we can go with that. But back to what you were saying is that Sri Ramakrishna also said that ordinary people can have samadhi. So he's referring to these experiences that come about at just the right time. He talked about the clock that they saw in Calcutta that was clear, probably kind of a plastic or plexiglass or glass, and the gears were all, you could see it all inside turning. So people would go see this clock at the museum or wherever, and look at all this big clock, all these gears turning. But they said that every once in a while, just maybe once a year or something, all the gears lined up so you could actually see through the clock to the other side. So somebody standing over there on the other side of the clock, you could actually wave at them. See, so that's that auspicious moment that he's talking about. He used that analogy once in a while to where everything lines up: karmas, samskaras, world conditions, lagunas. You get sattvic all of a sudden. Everything lines up because these things are lining up once in a while, but all of them lining up together at once, even an ordinary person cannot resist the onslaught of that light when it happens. It's remarkable. That's probably a good word that the doctors and psychiatrists will use. Oh, that was a remarkable experience, but don't think too much about it. But for the yogis, they're saying, bring it on. I saw reality, and relativity is now kind of paling to insignificance next to that. I want more of this. So they start intensifying their spiritual life, and they part company with conventional methods like medicine and psychiatry and therapy and so forth. And they begin to intensify their concentration using these four yogas. And concentration, of course, would be one of those. And you just mentioned pratyahara, which is a precursor to concentration, dharana, as the way the father of yoga set it up. So what I was going to say was these systems like yoga 8-limbed and Eightfold Path and all of these systems are not able to explain or describe necessarily the order of things that are going to happen to a soul. This is kind of what they see happening to people who are following a traditional path. But over days, months, years, even lifetimes, there are different things falling into place or back out of place, if you will, that are going to have to be tended, and so that you can become fully self-aware. And selfishness is one of the things that's going to have to go, and selflessness is one of the things that's going to have to come to stay in you, like these great souls. So I would interpret all of that in that way, is that ordinary people can have these samadhis even before they even practice asana or breathing. what to speak of pratyahara and concentration, because that's the way the Lord and the Mother of the Universe test people or wake them up. Holy Mother said a few wonderful things about that. She said sometimes people will be ignorant their whole life, and at the moment of death, they'll get enlightened. So there's these veils that come down over souls. Some of us, we don't like them, so we fight against them. We try and thin them out, try and rip them away. We want to see God desperately in this very lifetime, breathe free. And other souls are, as it were, just saying, I'm going to put that off. I'm going to be in this dream. I'm just going to dream myself to be an individual. And place a stick over water instead of just draw a line on it. We'll talk about that in an hour or so. Which ego is thicker and which one is more transparent. So some souls are like that. And who can tell why the soul takes on a body and enters into relativity when reality is always so exceedingly wonderful and beautiful. Sometimes there are souls that just want to test themselves. So there are all of these different kinds of ways and different kinds of souls with their different karmas and predilections and insights and lack thereof that are always pushing against that envelope or knocking on that door so that the door may be open and they can enter. They like that experience of being re-enlightened, you might say, being reminded that I am that. And I just played for a while, like a kid going out to play, and then when darkness comes, Ram Krishna said, they head back for home because that's their refuge. So all beings are doing that, and in different ways. So I can bring that up in the context of your points and your questions, that the traditions and the methods, they're so good for those of us who want to get this full enlightenment. Like one woman told me early in my life, she said, she was a Buddhist practitioner. She said, I want this to be my last lifetime, and I really want to get it this time, Papaji. I don't want anything to do to just bring me back here against my will and go through what I went through in the first 20 years of my life here in the West, in America particularly. So those methods are advised by all the seers for those sincere practitioners who want to reach full enlightenment and merge themselves completely into their essence rather than play around on the fringes of this for whatever reason. But when they're playing around on those fringes, they're going to catch a few sparkles of that light of consciousness, and that's what's happening in the case of a person then who has a little samadhi, a little udgata, a little bit of early spiritual energy dawning in them. I would consider it a great gift if that happened to me, if I were in a darkened condition, and I would immediately, follow that. But the way the world is set up and the way people's karmas are set up, there's a lot then, to use a pun, a lot to be desired about moving in that direction. Nonetheless, all beings will awaken in the end to their true nature. There's no other way around it. If that's your true nature, then that's your eternal refuge. And the Lord and Mother of the Universe is your eternal companion. So may peace come unto all. May wisdom dawn upon all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified by the armor of love. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat.